Whoops! Hit the computer. How you doing there? Boy, if I start blinking my right eye, it's because I got an abrasion in my right eye. The sinuses were kind of inflamed, and so I partially slept with my right eye partially opened, which caused it to dry out, and an abrasion, yada yada, you know. So, I'm not winking at you. Oh man, it was pretty painful there for a little while with my eye. I've had that happen before. It always happens this time of the year. I'm not really prone to allergies, but it's been like really, really dry here. Like, extremely dry. Anyway, I want to talk about real magic in life, and when I say magic, I'm not talking about, you know, trashy nonsense on TV shows and movies, Harry Potter, etc., etc. I'm talking about the actual things that are truly magic, and interestingly enough, and it's not interesting to me at all, that they don't teach about any of this stuff in school. Also, too, wanted to talk about a shortcut just as far as real education, but that's only a tiny part of this. And really, you can actually expand this list onto several different fronts, but several different fronts fundamentally branch from these things. And there's a lot of secrets. The stuff that people attribute to Plato, for example, was not written by Plato, but they're much more ancient. The language of the Timaeus and the Parmenides, as well as parts of the Republic, are far older than that of Plato and Socrates, Pythagoreans, and who knows before them. There's a secret actually found in Plato's Republic 501 ID to 511, and it's a reference to the golden ratio and the actual logos of the entire universe. And the only way you could actually arrive at these answers, and you can never get there today, even with multiple PhDs and the best Harvard education that money can buy today, is an ancient lost art called retroduction. And yes, I'm working on a booklet on retroduction, but I wanted to actually go over 5, but there's more than that. But fundamentally, these 5: water, retroduction, theurgy, resonance, and point source. Nikola Tesla, of course, famously said, to understand the secrets of the universe, we need to think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Another aspect of that is actually how we approach things, not only retroduction, but the dialectics that lead to truth. Since there is no measuring the measurer, and we cannot objectively examine things that are, by their very definition, subjective, like the soul, the ether, the transcendent principles that are antecedent to the psychophysical. In other words, it would be metaphysics, in short, would be the study of the signal antecedent to this radio, because this radio is just an assemblage of parts and an antenna, and of course a battery, and analog to digital converters, and a speaker, and you know, some other stuff, which of course has a beginning in time. Someone assembled it to do a job, and it does its job well, as long as it's together, but eventually humidity and corrosion and other garbage will tear it apart, just no different than the human body, of course. But I'm actually giving a lecture on water, electroculture, and magnetic seed exposure. And I've talked about this endlessly, and people don't get how important it is. And 90% of our technology, by the way, is based upon point source field technology. Scalar is point source. Magnetism is point source. A laser is point source. People only think in terms of quantity and assemblages of parts. But I mean, have you ever asked yourself the distinction between a 5-watt laser and a 5-watt light bulb? What's the distinction? One's totally useless and the other one is actually dangerous, especially if it's like a blue or an ultraviolet laser, for example. The only thing that actually defines a magnet, and what fascinates people about a magnet, I've talked about this endlessly as well, is that the field is ab extra, the field of influence. Yeah, ab extra to the object itself, but before it became a magnet, is quantitatively 100% identical. So the only thing that actually defines a magnet is, of course, its quality. It doesn't matter if it's ferrite, samarium cobalt, neodymium, iron boron. There's various things that are magnets. And people think, well, this is a magnet. Not that I have a magnet here on my table. These other things are not magnetic. But magnetism is the secondary half of the entire universe. Everything is magnetoreactive. Doesn't matter if it's diamagnetic, ferromagnetic, paramagnetic, it is magnetoreactive because it's the basis of all atoms. It's the basis of every field, because magnetism is the dielectric field. Kind of had, not a fight, but a discussion, heated discussion in live stream last night. And live stream last night was pretty lively. And I made a statement in a prior video from a couple days ago that there are no numbers in nature, and this is true. Mother Nature, once again, humorously, as I've said, is that hairy armpit chick with muddy feet and hemp skirt and dreadlocks, and she doesn't do numbers. People say, well, they keep bringing this up. Well, Fibonacci sequence, i.e. the golden ratio, you've talked about that endlessly. The Fibonacci sequence, which goes 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, so on and so forth, you know, these are human concepts. These are not things in nature. There are no numbers in nature, which would seemingly contradict, and of course it does, you know, some of your scientific heroes. So Mother Nature paints, you know, the universe in mathematics. There are famous sayings that go all the way back to earliest recorded history, but there are no numbers in nature. And by the way, I don't confuse arithmetic with mathematics. These are ratios. A ratio, of course, is a sympathy of phenomena, in the case of the golden ratio, to the one. Sympathetic resonance. That's no different than saying constructive interference. I've got like 1,000 videos on the supercell, i.e. the ferrocell. You can actually see the bands of light in the toroidal fashion. That would be constructive magnetism, where the light actually reaches your eye. And everywhere you see the absence of light is destructive interference, which is no different than saying increasing inertia and acceleration towards the dielectric. Excuse me, I'm talking about dialectic and dielectrics here. Kind of two similar words, but I certainly don't confuse the two. But this is what happens when you think a million miles a second and 10 steps ahead of your actual mouth moving, which I've always done. I'll talk about a shortcut to a true education here in a second, but this video is not about education. But we need to think in terms of sympathetic resonance. And of course, I've talked about point source, and I made videos about point source. But there is actual real magic in life, and you'll never hear about any of this stuff in high school, elementary school, or college, and there's no PhD that can wrap their brains around it because they've never studied this stuff. Once again, finishing up on numbers, there are no numbers in nature. I said natures there. I'll edit that out. No numbers in nature. These are only concepts that human beings create. Like if I had a pile of beans here, and I made like 5 separate piles, right? Is that one thing or 5 things? Human beings love to count things, especially mathematicians. Today's scientists are not scientists, they're mathematicians. Well, there's 5 there. And I just took the 5 heaps and I lumped them into one. It's like, now where'd the 5 go? These are concepts. Everything in nature is sympathetic resonance, constructive interference, destructive interference, and there is that which is harmonious to the one. What is harmonious and beautiful in nature is, of course, a ratio of sympathy. If something has, people love to say, golden ratio, golden ratio. What does golden ratio mean? I don't know. It just means beauty in nature. If something has a sympathetic resonance to the one, because phi is to 1 as 1 is to phi, this is our definition of beauty. There's no denying that this follows a golden spiral logarithmic extension from phi to the power of -3 all the way out to phi, and be phi squared and phi cubed and on and on. So this is beautiful. By any estimation, this of course is beauty, and there are many examples of beauty. Sand dollars. By the way, the sand dollar, I was the first person on earth to discover that. The actual division on the sand dollar is 137.5077, which is the golden angle, a mirror image of that, and the proportional ratio is 85 degrees. 85 degrees is equal to 1, as 137.5077 is equal to phi. Once again, these are numbers, but there are no numbers in ratio. There is only sympathetic resonance. If it is constructive praise, which is beauty by definition, and this is the logos and the dialectic of the retroductive lost art of the Pythagoreans and the Platonists, then this is, of course, that which is beautiful. Yeah. Everything, as far as theurgy, because I have a list of 5 things in this video, true magic of not only this world, but of the universe. Water retroduction, which is the key component of understanding subjective things which cannot be objectively analyzed. Theurgy. Well, what does theurgy mean? I mean, it mystifies people. It's like, what does it mean? It just means wisdom, subjective synthesis. You're talking about constructive, beautiful interference where you are sympathetic towards the one in every aspect of your life, and not by doing things, but by being sympathetic to it such that you are demodulating away from false identifications, fears, desires, anger, so on and so forth. I mean, this is theurgy. Liberation, of course, is demodulation. I've talked about this endlessly also, that there's no such thing as purified gold, because gold is gold is gold. But what do we mean by purification? We mean extraction of one thing relative to another, like this rock sample you have over here. It's got like maybe $400 of gold in it, but it's a $40 rock, 30, 40 bucks. Yeah, but there's $400 or more of gold in it. You know, why is that? Because it is extremely modulated, the gold, amongst the actual matrix or host rock. We don't use the word modulation, but bhavanyarodhanabanam, the subjugation of becoming, which is spiritual modulation, means liberation, or nivriti, or the word that we call nirvana. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha, the subjugation of spiritual perturbations. I've used the word chit, which means mind, or nous, or spiritus sanctum. You take your pick. Is the goal and fruit of yoga. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. The goal of yoga is the subjugation of nirodha, the perturbations of spirit. Vritti chitta, the ending of. Wouldn't that just be a fancy word of saying theurgy? Wouldn't that just be a fancy word of saying modulation? We need to understand water, and because I've had, I'm going to say, attacked on this many times. People say, well, how could consciousness exist in water? You just got an oxygen atom and 2 hydrogen atoms. I said, let me ask you a question. See this antenna that I plucked off of this radio here? This is actually like a dual meter, 2 meter 440 antenna. But it could just be a simple sympathetic resonance to 2 meter, and they're cut. And it's just actually, if you take the vinyl wrapper off of this, you'll actually see a coil of copper. Yeah? There is no signal in this antenna any more than there is consciousness in the water molecule. What's the distinction between, in other words, meaning the similarity thereof, between water and this antenna? It has a harmony, a ratio, and a proportionality of constructive interference such that the signal is able, with the greatest gain, this is called SNR, signal-to-noise ratio, the most signal you can get to pass from the end of this part of the antenna right into the radio, such that you can get the best signal. Isn't that sympathetic resonance? You are what you cleave to and identify with. I take a simple analogy, and how come schools don't teach stuff like this? Just the teacher bring in an apple. Remember when kids used to leave apples on the teacher's desk? Yeah. This apple essentially, even though it's a little bit oblong shaped, is essentially a torus. That would be force in motion of life, and that would of course correspond to the meat of the apple. And the dielectric, excuse me, once again I said dialectic instead of dielectric, I'll edit that out of this video, is fed from sunlight, and also too from the root system that sucks up water that this apple is able to grow. Torus, therefore we have magnetism, right? The actual vine that actually comes in right there at this dielectric portal, the same thing we actually see underneath the supercell. We see this big black spot underneath the supercell. I've got like 1,000 videos on the supercell, right? That would be the dielectric. That would be the principle of life, just kind of like your nervous system and your consciousness and your mind. Yep. What would be the definition of inertia or rest, or the ether? It's like, well, if you pluck it open here, right at the center, which is no different, let me superimpose this little hourglass shape here, i.e. a hyperboloid over top of this. The inverse of this hyperboloid is a torus. The inverse of a torus is a hyperboloid. Right here at the center where nothing is, there's no time here at the center of this hourglass. Yeah, there's no space. If it were a true hyperboloid of a field, there would be absolutely no space here at all. No time, because only a time is a measure of masses and magnitudes, and time doesn't exist, obviously. By the way, time is the number 4, which is the only digit missing in the first 5 digits of the Fibonacci sequence. We cut it open here. We've got these neat little things called seeds. Now, this is not analogous to the ether, If you're actually able to cut it apart as you're able to take a bean apart, you actually see a bean is like two halves, another torus, and there's an empty spot between, and that's where the life actually begins. Wouldn't this be analogous to rest? This little seed right here, which I can plant and germinate and feed it and give it attention, and it will make another apple tree and more apples and on and on. Wouldn't this be a definition of rest? This would be the true definition of energy. Within the seed, of course, is a genetic code to make another apple tree. But this is rest, and if we cleave this seed apart, I could do it, but not here on video, and it's a really tiny, slippery little seed. You'll actually see between the seed is two halves, and the actual life germinates in the hollow thereof. It's kind of like the hollow within a human body where life actually springs forth, because I'm not going to get into that topic. That's slightly controversial, but I mean, talking about the hollow of everything we experience in life itself always manifests through, in, or from a hollow. No different than, of course, the split section of a seed. So liberation is theurgy, which is just demodulation from false identification. Yeah, that is theurgy. Theurgy is not super mystical. It's only mystical because people are unable to wrap their minds around it. So we have of the five, water. Water is just the perfect incommensurable geometry for the manifestation of consciousness. Without life, without water, there is no life. Retroduction is this abductive synthesis of ancient Pythagorean and who knows before them dialectic methodology to come to an understanding of the nature of subjective principles that we cannot objectively examine. Can't take them apart, and we can't hold them in our hands. We can't see them or smell them or taste them or touch them. Kind of like love, fear, faith, and hope that this entire world's been built upon. Same thing as a field. No branch of science has ever defined the term field. They've never defined energy. So that gets at theurgy. Resonance. Isn't everything constructive and destructive interference? Isn't that how we're supposed to live our life? What I actually have tattooed here is an ancient saying. There's only two ancient symbolic representators of the Pythagoreans, and who knows who they got it from. One is the Pythagorean pentagram, which is made out of three triangles exactly like this. The 108, 36, 36 triangle, which is the exact same geometry as the water molecule, which is necessary for life and is the antenna for consciousness. Remember, there's no signal in this antenna. Everybody with two brain cells knows that. There's no consciousness in the water molecule. It is the antenna for the manifestation of consciousness itself. If I tell you anything and you believe nothing, you better believe that, because that is a huge secret of this universe. And you won't find that written in any book anywhere that I've ever come across. You won't find it mentioned in Plato or Pythagoras or Numenius or Cyrianus or Damasius or Plotinus, on, but I mean, that is the nature of water. So constructive and destructive interference. So we can either destroy ourselves or raise ourselves up by our sympathetic to whatever it is that we cleave to. Either we desire, or we know that it will lift us up, or we know that it will destroy us. We are, of course, masters of our own fate. A lot of people don't believe that. They want to blame everybody else but themselves, unfortunately, but that's a matter for another discussion. So an antenna, of course, is a harmonic. There's no signal in an antenna, nor is there consciousness, of course, in water itself. I want to talk quickly about a shortcut to true education. All of us, probably 99% of you, you spent, like, what is it now, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. You go home, do 3 to 4 hours of homework. You could curb 70% of all of that useless trash with a genuine education. People that actually wrote the most brilliant stuff that humanity has ever produced. The Periphysian, the Enneads of Plotinus, the Divina Proportione, Theoria Philosophiae Naturalis, the great, great, great works of true mind-bending, magnificent splendor, intellectual, spiritual splendor. None of these people grew up doing a bunch of garbage work. They didn't go to public schools. They didn't do homework. And I'm not against not working hard. They studied the greats. A true education is about building a toolbox in your head so that you can understand things, discern things, determine what is true from what is false. Mere memorization, all this trash, 75 to 80% of what you're taught from elementary, actually it's more than that, it's really like about 90%. What you're taught in school is useless. The great masters studied the great masters because what it did is it built a toolbox in their head. And that is what everybody needs, but nobody has. People can't discern propaganda anymore. People are led around, as you very well know, like sheep. Nobody has a mind anymore. Their mind belongs to whatever idiot box it is that they're watching. Okay. Safe and effective? Okay. That's not funny, actually, but it kind of is. So energy, frequency, and vibration, like Nikola Tesla said. Sympathetic resonance, is it constructive interference or is it destructive? Is this helping me in my life and true understanding, or is it destructive? Like, I enjoy doing it, but it's destroying my life. It's like, well, you need to realize that and then not stop doing it. A lot of people, though, of course, have addictive personalities, but they have addictive personalities because they don't understand the ultimate destruction that is wrought from these things. So, no, there are no numbers in nature. Everything is a ratio of sympathy. It is either constructive interference or destructive interference. You can explain the entire universe using this simple apple analogy. See here a torus, kids? Yep, I'm going to explain the torus. They get the torus. Yep. You know how the water and the nutrients come in through the vine right here, which is plucked? That's the dielectric, right? The life force that feeds the apple and makes it grow. And then here we have true energy or rest, that from which the entire apple tree itself came from, and all its leaves and its trunks and its roots and its apples and its more apples, is this little thing right here. That is analogous to true energy. That would be rest and inertia. And if I cleave this seed apart, it's hollow in the center, and that, as you can actually see, I don't know if you ever sprouted beans before, there's a little hollow nave. The life comes out right from the dead, empty spot in the center. All of life comes from, and we experience life through these hollow black centers, our eyes, our ears, our nose, our mouth, and various other orifices. Nature is screaming at humanity, the hairy armpit chick, as I humorously like to call her, but people aren't listening. Nobody's listening. And that hippie chick, she don't know nothing. She don't even have a calculator. The only thing nature understands is force in motion, inertia, and acceleration. Everything is just simplex pressure mediation. There are absolutely no numbers in nature. There are no numbers in nature. Let me repeat that again, 'cause I don't agree with you. There's numbers in nature. What about the Fibonacci sequence? Those aren't numbers. Those are ratios of sympathy. The ratio of sympathy is closest to the 1, then that is a ratio. That's not a number. Well, it's phi. It's the golden section, which is 1.618. No, 1.618, when we conceptualize it, is a perfect sympathetic doppelganger in multiplicative value, which is 1.618, relative to 1, because that which we see as beautiful in nature is just a multiplicative harmonic ratio to the 1. Beauty is the 1, and the 1 in refulgent attribution is beauty, that which we call the golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence. But these numbers came about from man, not from nature. There are no numbers in nature. So the ultimate magic of the entire universe, and there are other little nitpicky things I could talk about here, but the video would be endlessly long, and I talk about it in various other modalities, is water, which I think I explained, retroduction, THEURGY. Yeah, THEURGY is not that difficult. Sympathetic resonance through proper identification. And this is engaging in retroduction. Nami sota, that is not my soul, that is not my soul. Of course, my soul, of course, is improper. You can't say my soul and one thing implying it has another. Like, nothing has a soul. A radio doesn't have a signal implying possession. There's a little fly buzzing around here. I'm going to edit him out. So, resonance. How proximal is it to that which is desirable? Gold extraction, isn't that just concentration? Because you can't purify something that is fundamentally itself in every form. Whether it's scattered or not is, of course, redundant. And lastly, of course, point source. Making oneself point source by means of spirit. Our technology that we have that's so fascinating, a magnet is a point source object. It's qualitative, not quantitative. Lasers, scalar, parabolic dish, bringing things into focus. You could burn through steel. You could burn anything with a concave mirror, for example. What are you doing? I'm bringing light to a focus. Aren't you making a point source concentration of something? When something is point source, it is powerful. It will not take upon itself anything else, and it's not subject to influence from anything else. This is the magic of point source. That's a matter for another video, which I've actually already made on point source technology. So this is the real magic in life, and also, too, of liberation and theurgy and proper understanding and building the toolbox within your head. But we're not taught any of this stuff in school or college. Ratioed sympathy. We can have constructive interference in life or destructive. Well, so there's no consciousness in water. It's just an oxygen atom and two hydrogens. Like, well, you're right. I thought you said there was. Well, there's no signal in this antenna. Isn't that the case? You're right. Well, what does this antenna do? Isn't it cut to a certain wavelength that is sympathetic to 2 meters? If it is cut to a certain length that is a harmonic ratio to the signal desired to be gained and collected. Yeah. Isn't that the case? Well, that's right. What do you think water is? It's the only incommensurable perfect geometry in the entire universe. By the way, I was talking about the Greek tattooed on my knuckles here. It says eugata, and it's translated as health. But it doesn't mean that. It means sympathetic perfection of resonance. It's no different than talking about theurgy, making yourself self-similar to that which is to be praised, that which is antecedent and everlasting, the true definition of liberation, the true definition of transcendence, by disobjectifying from everything that causes people suffering and desire and fear and anger, because you're worried about propping up that which, of course, you can never take refuge in. You know, psychophysical life, you can have all the toys and all the money, but you ain't going to take it with you, obviously. Anyway, I've flapped my lips enough in this video. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day.